You are listening to the Feedback
Podcast with my homie Back.
Welcome to the Feedback Podcast, everybody. My name is Back. Miko in the house.
Hello, world.
We got Will in the house, Will Bridges, Zach Ernst. We're live here at Antones. Thank you so much for having us, by the way. Before we get started, quick shout out to Herd Presents. Make sure you go to EmpireATX.com for the dope lineup. They got the Ohio players, the Village People, believe it or not.
Village People. All of them, I hear.
Yeah, and Rebirth Brass Band. So go to EmpireATX.com and use promo code FDBK for 10% off your tickets.
That works not only for shows, but for events like Body Rock.
Peligrosa.
Yep, all those.
Always good stuff. Thanks. Shout out to Herd. All right, we got to jump right into it because it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you guys and at this iconic venue, the home of the Blues, Antones. Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah.
So I'd like to jump right into it. What was I want to talk to Zach first because his history and his story as a musician. What's your background in music? Did you grow up with the dad with a record collection? What was it?
I started playing guitar when I was 12, mostly because I wasn't athletic and I saw it as a way to meet girls, really. Just couldn't play sports. I realized that about that time and just, saw someone at a party with a guitar and stuff and said,
like, oh, that's cool. I want to do that.
No. And girls were around that guy.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be
exactly
that dude.
Right. And so I started taking lessons and things like that. And, my parents were always real supportive, and I'd go see concerts with them, like go see Neil Young with my dad, go see McCartney with my mom, like all those things when I was real young, so I was into all that stuff. And then I'm sure that my introduction to Antones, like a lot of people, was through Stevie Ray Vaughan and the Fabulous Thunderbirds and things like that. And my dad had all those records, and on into Storyville and Archangels and all that stuff. He's like into roots music and blues music and stuff like that. So I grew up listening to my dad's CD collection at that time and hearing all this stuff. And so as I got into high school, got a little bit more refined into the stuff that I was into and that I liked and things like that. And first came to Antones in 2002 to see Double Trouble. They had sort of done this comeback record with a bunch of special guests on it and things like that. So they played on Lavaca in 2002 when that record came out, and it was Tommy Shannon and Chris Layton and Reese Winans, I think, was on the gig, and Mike Keller, who plays here all the time, was playing guitar with them. And that was my first time, and I remember, might be making this up, but I feel like I remember seeing Ilsa there and going to the merch stand and getting an Antones t-shirt and all this same
Wait,
stuff.
so you're originally from Austin?
No, sorry, I'm from College Station, but my uncle lives here. Both my mom and my uncle went to the University of Texas, and
Good choice.
so I was in high school, 16, and came over and stayed at our uncle's house.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and then we all came over, and that was my junior year of high school, and then kept finding more and more excuses to come over here for shows and things like that. So
When did you permanently move? When did you make that permanent move?
when I graduated, this was the only school I applied to, and I knew I wanted to come here, and so
Half applied to the school, half applied to the city.
that's right. Yeah, totally. So I knew, in the music scene and going to shows and things was definitely a big part of that decision, and wanting to be a guitar player and all that stuff.
But you know what kind of genre you wanted to play, or were you all over the place at the time?
I was pretty all over the place, but as I got into high school, I started getting Meters records and James Brown records, and
wow, there's a reference.
Stuff that was a little bit cooler. I hadn't kind of cleaned out all the other stuff out of my collection yet, really, but I kind of knew what I liked, and was getting a little bit more into the history of things when I moved here.
I mean, and Will's similar story with your dad, right? As far as the record and influence, taking you to shows.
Yeah, my dad was also born and raised in Austin, and so, Austin was a much different town then, but music has always been a part of the culture. and he got real into the blues in college. Used to go to the old Antones on Guadalupe. Used to go to Soap Creek and a place called Jake's, and kind of ran with some of those guys. Had buddies from college that were, bigger in the scene. My dad was, his whole career was in medicine. He was a surgeon, so he didn't get to go out as much as he probably liked. He's retired now and actually is back to full-time bluesman, playing blues harmonica, once a week with
nice. So he performs. He actually plays.
Yeah, he was always playing for fun and always playing at the house. And so I was exposed to it at a young age because of that. Playing records, old Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Bob Dylan, Jimmy Reed, lots of Jimmy Reed. And my sister, who's 8 years older than me, she is a really talented musician, pianist, and singer. And so I was the youngest of the family, so it was kind of just natural to me to, I dabbled in piano lessons when I was like 5 and didn't really like that, and then got into the drums, and then nobody else liked that.
Did you have a drum kit at home? Did you have a drum kit at home?
Yeah, but that
didn't last
at this
long?
age, it was like not like the full size kit,
right?
So those things sound even worse. It just, pots and pans sound better than those little mid-sized kits. But so finally, I succumbed to what my dad was doing primarily at the time, which was just playing guitar. And I grew up playing on his Gibson Hummingbird. Fell in love with that Gibson Rosewood neck. Zach's more of a Fender guy.
Were you ever in a band?
Yeah, I did. I grew up playing in little bands, little garage bands.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
How did the booking experience come around? Because it's one thing to be part of a band and learn how to play, and then be like, okay, now we got to play shows, so we got to go around and and get gigs. So how did that come about for you?
For me, it was easy. I was exposed to people that were way better than myself.
Yeah.
And I had to make a sort of game time decision. I was like, okay, I either got to compete against that guy, or I can kind of shift my role in the village and be a part of his team, or support that person. So that's when I started getting into audio engineering and recording, and then later booking, promoting, and all that.
What about you, Zach?
You mean booking my own bands, or being
just the booking experience alone? You book for Paramount, you book here at Antones.
Yep.
And just that process, I'm always curious about what it's like the first time when you're
making that jump.
Making that jump. Like, I'm going to be, not only I'm a musician, but there's the business side to the whole industry that I need to learn and make sure that we get paid, hopefully, and we can move on as musicians.
Yeah, my first experience with anything in the music business was being on the Music and Entertainment Committee at the University of Texas, which put on concerts and stuff. So I joined that my freshman year, and you go to this committee and you'd have a budget that you could spend to spend a lot of it on 40 Acres Fest, spend it on various shows throughout the year that were all free for students and stuff like that. So that was my first experience, which was with a really large budget, and booking $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 acts, playing shows for students. And now that I know the world better, the music booking world better and things, it's like college gigs are just the easiest for artists and for agents, because they got a lot of money, they have no idea
what they're doing,
and we were 18, 19, and it was a really cool kind of first introduction to the business. And then
it's almost, it wasn't the real world, so it may have spoiled you a bit.
Yeah, oh yeah, sure, yeah. But one of the shows that I booked that kind of got me into the next phase of things was I booked Little Richard to play at the Capitol, not the Capitol, at the Tower in 2007.
Ooh.
And so that was my sophomore year, I guess, junior year.
Dating yourself.
But so it
Wait,
was,
I'm older than you? Shit.
but so that was something that kind of got me. I booked an artist to open that show, Black Joe Lewis. And so that's how I met Joe.
Black Joe Lewis, love him.
And then wound up playing with him for 5 years after that. And then it was also in that experience that I first met Yves Monse, who plays here all the time, because I took like Little Richard posters over to Antone's record shop to hang them and stuff. And she's like, wait, Little Richard's playing here? I was like, yeah, it's a free show down the block. And
Free show, Little Richard. Try that today.
yeah. And so it was crazy, but that was all, going on back in school.
So you were the lead guitarist of Black Joe Lewis and the Honey Bear.
I'd call myself the rhythm guitar player.
Not lead?
No, I mean Joe was.
Joe was lead. Yeah.
But I was my hero, was Steve Cropper and stuff like that, and the meters and things.
Yeah.
So being in the rhythm section was sort of what I aspired to. I mean, in the liner notes or the credits of those records, I credited myself as rhythm guitar player, just kind of a trip I was on at the time.
At the time, you have an interesting experience in that you started with music and as a performing musician, and then went into booking in college, and then went back to music, and then now you're back into booking. Was there overlap between it during that time? Were you playing while you were at UT? Were you?
Not really. No, I wasn't playing.
So it's
at
really
all.
one or the
I
other
never
at
really
any
had
point
a
in life.
band before the
Joe
experience. So I played just for myself and
for the girls.
For the girls going on tour. Come on.
Well, that all kind of happened later, but I didn't have any bands really in high school or anything like that. I just kind of was going to lessons, and it was like my favorite hour of the week to do that. But I didn't really play on stage and wasn't really into that yet. So, that was just kind of a hobby, and then everything else sort of came later. But yeah, you're right. I have volleyed back and forth between those things. Yeah.
One more personal question I have: Did you help book Common for UT?
I did, yeah.
Oh, I was at another free show at UT. I was at.
Yeah, that was the year.
Again, try that today.
That was 2006. That was the year prior to
your freshman year, if you will.
No, that would have been my sophomore year.
Oh, that's your sophomore year.
Little Richard was
your
junior year, but I booked. I've always had a thing for putting together good pairings or good bills, or the perfect opener for the headliner is something I still aspire to, and I'm always driven by. And so for that Common show, we had Brownout open for him.
Yep.
Which Brownout was sort of a new thing at the time, and that was my first time meeting Adrian Casada and stuff. Was way back then when I was 19, and then so putting, Black Joe Lewis and this great rockabilly band, the Jungle Rockers, on before Little Richard, it was all part of this.
Right, just good flow.
This thing, yeah.
So I'll move on to Antone. So you said your dad used to take you to Antone's back when he was on Guadalupe. Did you meet him at the time? You knew who he was, and you kind of kept up with him? Like, what was your connection to him?
Clifford?
Yeah.
I did get to meet Clifford, and I met him a bunch of times, but I sort of regret to say that I never really knew him as an adult, like an adult to an adult. I was always very much a kid coming in there, and because of some of my dad's friends that knew him and stuff, I would get introduced, and I just remember thinking like, oh wow, like that's
the coolest
he's
dude.
The club owner. He owns the joint.
But you were known as such and such a son.
Yeah, or such and such's friend's son. But he gave me a poster one time. I think he gave me a couple posters that I have to this day because he loved kids and loved getting kids excited about music, especially roots music and the blues. And I wish that I would have had gotten to know him a little bit more. My sister got to know him, and one of the things that musicians in particular, always say about Cliff is that if he liked you and he thought you were good, had some talent, he would really fill up your confidence, and just make you feel like you were a superstar. And so my sister, who was a singer at the time and was probably this was probably when she was 19 or something, and she was kind of probably acting like a little older than she really was at the time, and next thing she knows, she said that she was basically Clifford's date to the Four Seasons bar. He said, well, come with me. We're going to the Four Seasons bar. and so next thing she knows, she's at the Four Seasons bar with all these people, and he's introducing to her like, hey, this is Caroline. You got to hear her sing. We're going to get her a record deal. She's going to the top and all this stuff. So
and she's on cloud 9.
He had those types of relationships with a lot of people, and that really inspired folks because, you know, not all of those people went on to have careers, but a lot of them did.
Right.
Yeah. So your story, how you met, I mean, you were taking that class at UT because he was involved, you know, teaching Blues According to Cliff, I think it was called, something like that.
So I knew, you know, I had been to Antones in high school, and being from 90 miles away, I knew about as much about it as you would think. I knew who Clifford Antone was. I knew what Antones was, and
it goes to the mic a little.
Yep, sorry, and I knew the connection to some of the music that I had grown up with, but enough so that I knew that was the coolest elective that you could get into, and it was a God, I don't remember what school it was in, but it wasn't my major, so I had to do the waitlist thing, or I can't even remember the system anymore, but I remember desperately wanting to get in that class just because I thought it'd be cool, and trying to, you know, get in the whatever the portal was with UT back then, and was so happy when I got it. You know, I remember seeing it on my screen, like the Blues According to Clifford Antone. I mean, it's like the greatest.
Like all those refreshes paid off.
Yeah, it's like the greatest.
We've all been there.
The coolest name for a class ever. I mean, it's awesome. So I got it, and that was my second semester of my first year.
That's pretty good. And then you were booking after that, so that's a good follow.
Yeah, so I met him in January of 2005, and he passed away in June of
2006.
May of 2006, around that time. And so, you know, I like a lot of teenagers, music fans and stuff. You have kind of cool band T-shirts and stuff. So I remember I had like an Albert King T-shirt, and like that was sort of my coy way of like introducing myself.
Right.
I wasn't gonna go up and talk to him because I was pretty shy, but I have like my Albert King T-shirt on and just be sitting kind of in the second row or
just
something.
kind of
Like,
throw your arm back.
Yeah, right.
You know.
and so he'd be like, "Hey man, cool, you know, cool T-shirt, stuff like that." And so that was sort of because he was an imposing figure. I mean, he was very warm, but you know, and he loved that class. He loved turning people on to all his favorite music and things like that. But I don't know, if you're 18 and just kind of moved to Austin and stuff, you don't want to exactly go up there and start bugging him like everybody else.
Like, yeah, I know blues too.
Yeah.
Do you know about this guy and that guy and
but-
that guy? You're like, yeah, they're my friends.
Yeah, so I knew better than to do that, and I really knew better than to tell him that I played guitar, because the whole time that we were friends, he never knew that I played, because I would go, you know, I met him probably 3-4 weeks into the class, kind of go up to him after and say, hey, I'm, you know, want to go see some shows at the club, or I see you've got, you know, Blue Monday, I really want to go. And he said, gave me his card with his cell phone number on the back and was like, call me anytime you want to go. And I called him, and he picked up and he said, yeah, I'll be there. And like I got on the e-bus back then to go. And
e-bus for everyone goes from UT to downtown Austin for free for students.
So Jester to 5th and Lavaca, and went, and sure enough he was there, and I felt like I could get closer to him or gain more knowledge and things, because when we would go on Blue Mondays, like there would be kids with their parents with Stratocasters every week lining up wanting to sit in. I mean, and he hated that.
Yeah.
Like,
really?
He hated it.
Why?
Well, it was his stage, and it was a place that you had to earn the right to be. There was never really an open blues jam at Antones.
Right.
It's sort of like you've got to come, be a part of the scene. You've got to be friends with people. You got to hang out every night.
You got to earn your ranks.
And even back in the day, you've got to sit there with the guitar on the side 100 times before maybe at 1:45 he'll say, oh, get up and play, and there's no one, you know, you're playing for the guy sweeping up or stuff. So now that I know the mythology of the club a little better, it's reaffirmed that my instincts were right to just never, I mean, I feel like he would have put a guard up, and and you know, just at the time being real hungry to learn this stuff, and also in the era of rampant file sharing on campus, I could look at the syllabus and say, oh, next week is Stax Records. What does that mean? And then get it all and then kind of know what was going on. And that's what I did week to week, was just get 20, 30 albums. I mean, still most of my record collection, a lot of which makes the house music down there, is stuff that I downloaded
From
illegally at UT when I was in his class. I didn't really realize.
Was he a purist in the sense that he'd be like, oh, well, this is blues and this is not?
Yeah.
And was
He said there have never been any good artists since Al Green. Al Green was the last
Really?
great
Wow.
artist. Yeah.
Wow.
That's a
He
big
believed
statement to
it.
make. But was he? Did he come to you and say, "Hey, check out these records. Oh, check out this record"?
Yeah, he would. Yeah, I would talk to him about something, and then he'd say, hey, there's something in my car that you would like. Follow me out to my car. And he'd have this big kind of Suburban or Expedition or something down there, like illegally parked in front of the, somehow just parked on 21st Street, and then hand me like Little Son Jackson, Frankie Lee Sims, like these crazy lowdown things, and say, just, bring it back whenever.
Wow, that's amazing.
Unprompted, he probably would have 50 CDs in his car, and if it would be his dream that all the students would, follow him like the Pied Piper to his car, and he could give one.
Right.
Yeah.
Spread the awareness of what he
Yeah,
loves.
and give someone a Fats Domino record, someone a Chuck Berry record, someone a Otis Rush record. I mean, that's why he taught the class. That was his whole mission, and
I mean,
that was everything.
when I was watching a little bit of that documentary online, and when he says, the blues, I didn't choose the blues just chose me, and the way he talks about it, like you really get to hear someone talk that passionate about something, especially music. And was he ever a musician? Did he ever play anything, or?
Yeah, he's a bass player.
Oh, well, there you go.
I don't think he had much confidence in his playing. He'd sort of, if there was no other bass player there, he would. There's some photos of him playing with various greats, but at the time when I took the class, he and Pine Top were playing as a duo at the Broken Spoke. So Alvin Crow was playing once a week at the Broken Spoke, and then during the set break, Pine Top would play piano and Cliff would play bass, and Pine Top would sell CDs, and they did that every week.
Huh, did not know that.
How did he build all these relationships? I mean, he's from Texas, the Texas-Louisiana border, and then he loved Chicago blues. And bringing all these artists here, was he traveling a lot, or how was he building all these relationships with artists to be able to be like, hey, B.B. King is coming, Albert King is coming, or Pine Top is coming?
Will, you want to take that? Or?
I'll take a stab at the first part of it. Going back to what you said about his quote saying he didn't choose the blues chose him. When he says that in the documentary, which anybody interested in the history of Antones should definitely check out, the documentary Antones Home of the Blues is what it's called. It came out in 2004.
We sell it in the gift shop. So.
We do sell
Or
it
in
in
our
the
rec
gift shop.
Noted.
You can actually get it on Apple TV as well, or iTunes or whatever, but it is without a doubt the most comprehensive collection of just Antone's history. And I mean, it takes 2 or 3 sittings to really absorb it because it's just so chock full of content. It's incredible that they were filming at the time. It's incredible that they made the film before he passed because they didn't finish it until 2 years before. It's just so that's a must see for
and it was
anybody
kind
that
of
wants to learn.
before this rampant music documentary. Now, like every unknown session player, every club, there's so many music documentaries come out every other month. But it was like 2000.
Yeah,
They were making
Before it was cool.
2003 or something.
but when he says I didn't choose blues chose me, it wasn't like some little like catchphrase of his. I mean, he says it with this earnest bewilderment of kind of like
It's like,
he
why
doesn't know
me?
how that he doesn't know
How he ended
know
up here.
why it happened. It just happened. We've learned a little bit more about the history of that since we've gotten involved because we've really gotten to know Susan really well. I mean, she's like family to us now. Talk to her just about every day. If it's not something about the club, it's about the Clifford Antone Foundation or Help Clifford Help Kids, some of the philanthropic stuff she does. But by getting to know her, we've gotten to understand their upbringing. They were from Port Arthur. Their parents were Lebanese immigrants, basically. So they weren't blues buffs.
Right.
So where the heck did they learn about the blues? Well, their parents ran a shop called Antones Imports. And Antones Imports, one of the employees was named Big Henry. And Big Henry is apparently like the progenitor to like how Clifford got into the blues. Yeah, ever since he was a little kid, he'd be playing, Big Henry would be in there playing 45s, playing records. And kind of in the same way that Clifford would educate people and inspire them and say, loan them records and stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Big Henry did that
I think
for him.
Clifford saw this big magnetic guy having fun playing music, and he was curious, and so they became close friends. Then when Clifford got older, Big Henry would take him around to the blues clubs and kind of introduced him to that community in Port Arthur and everything. So we kind of stumbled upon that bit of history after we had opened the club, because we were trying to find out a name to call the record shop downstairs. And we were asking Susan, hey, is there any historical nugget that hasn't been used yet that we haven't talked about yet? And she looked at us like, you think I've been just holding on to something? I think it's pretty much all been covered. So we were really racking our brains and trying to think of something clever that wasn't too cute and whatever. And Susan called us one day, actually called Zach, and said, well, she called me too, but I just remember she was so excited. She was saying, oh my gosh, I woke up and Cliff must have sent this to me, because I hadn't thought about this in forever. But she said, Big Henry, that's where it all started. Big Henry, that's worked in my parents' shop. That's who turned Clifford onto the blues. She said, if it wasn't for Big Henry, there would be no Antones. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Of course, there was going to be no better idea than that. So we jumped on it and have learned more about Big Henry. There's a picture of Henry and Cliff downstairs in the shop. And another thing that Susan said that I thought was so cool and special is that when Cliff opened Antones in the original in 1975, he was so proud and had his parents in from Port Arthur, and the only person that he was just as proud to show the club off to was Big Henry. It was like his third parent being there. Big Henry's not with us anymore, but that was a really cool thing to learn about. Another thing that's always stuck out to me, and this also is quoted in the DVD, but being from Port Arthur, you're right there, as you said, like on the Gulf Coast in between Lafayette you're as close to Lafayette and New Orleans as you are Houston and some of these other places, right? Yeah. I'm bad at geography, but something like that. So the music from Louisiana is just as much the blues from that perspective as is what we think of as Texas blues, electric blues, Chicago, Houston blues. So that is when people think of Antones, they think of the blues, but sometimes they forget to think about Zydeco and brass bands, and we do a lot of those shows here, obviously. But that's because that all came from Clifford. He was quoted as saying that his inspiration for starting the club was going to New Orleans for the first time as a young person and just being blown away by just the energy and wanting to create a spot. I guess when he ended up in Austin, I wanted to create a spot that could house that and be a home for that. When Clifford started the first club in 75, July 15th, the original opening date, he didn't have a blues band play it. He had Clifton Chenier, Zydeco King of New Orleans, play it. So again, people forget, or a lot of times don't know about that connection to Louisiana and New Orleans and everything. We had C.J. Chenier, Clifton's son, play our opening as a homage to that. But anyway, I've kind of gotten a little...
That's fine. Story's great, man.
Yeah,
I ask one question, it's from your mouth. I love it.
So I'll say one more thing, and then I'm going to kick it off to Zach. So when it came to building that network, so that's kind of the foundation, but when it came to building that network, and here's Zach may have correct me on this, but I don't think that he had that much of a network. But there wasn't that many people into the blues at that time, and there certainly wasn't anybody in Texas, or let alone Austin, Texas, booking those bands and actually paying those bands, because the blues at that time was down and out, man. I mean, other than a few kind of crossover guys that were the big names, nobody really could, even like get gigs. So word got out quickly that, hey, there's this guy in Austin, Texas.
No social media, none of that stuff.
And people thought he was kind of crazy. They're like, this young guy, he started this club, and he is a fanatic about the blues, and he knows about all of us. He knows all of our music. He knows all of our history and all of our catalog. He would track these folks down. But when the floodgates really opened, I think, is when some of the first people he got down from Chicago, like Sunnyland Slim. Yeah, Sunnyland Slim, and who went back to Chicago and was like, hey, y'all got to get down to Austin and check out this guy Clifford. So.
Because he knew the people he knew all the players who were on the records too, and that was, it wasn't a time where you credited all the, on 45s there wasn't a place to list who played drums, who played guitar,
right,
all that stuff. Famously, James Jamerson, the greatest electric bass player of all time, his name didn't appear anywhere on liner notes until 1972 and What's Going On, and he had played every iconic Motown bass line before that. So for him to know the bass player who played on the Muddy Waters records, or even Sunnyland Slim cut a few things on his own, but was such a cult figure. I mean, would play clubs in Chicago and really nowhere else. I mean, there wasn't much blues revivalism yet. It was long hair and blue jeans and playing maybe blues rock that is somehow so watered down version of Zeppelin or Mountain or stuff like that. Cream, all these, it was all this psychedelic blues rock stuff, which I think turned some people on. Certainly Zeppelin doing all these Willie Dixon songs, and some people would be inclined to follow that back, but the 70s wasn't a time for this music. And it's a little bit before the movie The Blues Brothers was made, but in that movie they have Aretha Franklin and James Brown and John Lee Hooker and all these people, and like during the disco age, which was sort of kicking off a little bit after 1975, but that was very passé. That was the music of 15 years ago. So they were looking for anywhere to work, and then suddenly, whether it's R&B and soul artists like that, or blues artists who were never really known in the first place, to have a guy who will treat you like a king and pay you, and he'd book them for 5 or 6 nights, and they'd play over there at 6 in Brazos and then hang out and go fishing all day. And I mean, it must have been the greatest gig, and it's not like it was packed every night by any means, but they could come by themselves. The other thing that was happening at the time was there were great young musicians in Austin, many of whom came down from Dallas, starting with like Denny Freeman, and then the Vaughn brothers, and then the folks who became the Cobras and the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and all these backing bands like that. And some of the East Austin people who played on the East Austin scene, like W.C. Clark Blues Review, or there were a lot of great musicians here where these artists could come down by themselves. So they didn't have to split the money 8 ways. They could just come down by themselves. There'd be a great young band who knew all their stuff, who would play probably for nothing, just for the opportunity to be with these guys. I mean, it's the dream gig. I can't imagine how great that would be at a time where even in your hometown, or especially in your hometown, you maybe make $50 or something. And, and so that's what it's all about, is the magic connection of these young, largely white musicians who are obsessed with the blues, all meeting these folks who they're not old yet. They're maybe in their 40s, maybe in their 50s, but they've still got a lot of fire in them, and they're down here to make some money and to, play for young people, and then the young people are excited to learn from their heroes. And all of that coming together is still the magic of this place, that on a really good night we're able to get a little glimmer of that here. That's what that's the genius of Clifford, was making a place where all those folks could come together and
put people together that haven't necessarily played together before, or haven't played in a long time together. Is that something that you guys try to do?
Absolutely.
When you book
and
here?
I'll let Zach talk about that, but I was going to reiterate that before you even said it, that, I mean, first off, there was this magic to kind of the timing of it, because I don't really know the origin of this, Zach, but there was a little bubbling blues scene in Texas out of Fort Worth and Dallas. And so that kind of fit perfectly into, and then Austin became this hotspot destination for musicians because of what was going on with like Willie and the Cosmic Cowboy kind of thing. It was like this rebellious city where, especially for the arts and music, kind of anything goes, and it was where like the underdogs could kind of come and flourish. And you had this captive audience of UT folks, and it was just like perfect time in that regard. But then you had that kind of perfect person to come in and play chemist. I like to think of it as like chemistry set, because that's what Clifford would do. He would say, okay, I know this person. What happens if I throw them on stage with this person? And it was like an experiment in real time. You know, that's one of the things that's great about the blues. The blues is such a simple genre at its essence. It's kind of the mother tongue of
the foundation of funk and even hip hop and a lot of.
And so because it's simple, you know, there's a lot of room for expression and improvisation, and you can have people kind of jam and get up and sit in and things. You can't do that with every genre, because sometimes you got to know the song, or you got to know the charts, or you got to kind of rehearse or something. But so it was literally like, and to this day we really try and honor this spirit. It was not like a performance venue where, okay, these guys are just gonna, like, they're here to perform for you and run through these songs and you're gonna clap in between songs. It was more like, hey, something's gonna go on stage and we're not necessarily sure what it's gonna be, and y'all are just lucky to kind of be flies on the wall in here, you know. It was it was more about people just being in awe and anticipation of what was happening or what may happen or who might show up, and that kind of it was just all this room for like possibilities of what could happen. And then the last element of it that was so key is it often had this like generation gap thing between it too, because it was the old guys getting up there with the younger players and passing down that torch, you know. And they were so excited to do it because they were so excited to find a contingent of young folks that were into it and a place to do it. And the young folks were so excited because they couldn't believe they were on stage with these folks. And again, they didn't care if there was 2 people in the room, because what they were doing on stage just alone in itself was just like so magical. So, you know, Cliff really, in that approach, not only revitalized the blues, but passed the blues down to a whole other genre and created like a culture and tradition of doing that. That, you know, now is at least 2 generations in, and we hope to
go 3.
You know, that's something that's important to us, is like keeping that element of it alive.
I think, you know, now it is cool to be nostalgic for the 50s and 60s, or everything sort of is through this lens of throwback.
There's a retro something.
There's always something,
but
you know, and it is good when Sharon Jones does what she did, or Amy Winehouse, or these things, because then people chase the, you know, like on hip hop, chasing the samples back, or like the vibe of this groove on this or that. If you take that and go find the source and stuff, that will ultimately enrich your life. You know, it's a good thing. But, you know, the couple things that I think about in terms of this place is just like in 1975, that wasn't a thing. I mean, it's 20 years since Elvis, 10 years, you know, 12 years since the Beatles, whatever. Being a throwback blues band in the 70s was just weird. I mean, it was nuts, you know. I mean, it wasn't in vogue thing to do, or, you know, the things that Clifford was doing and that Steve Dean was doing with his record shop selling blues records next door. You know, these people were freaks. I mean, they didn't care if you weren't there. They knew they were the coolest people in the room, and they didn't care if you didn't come to their party, because they had found this thing, and they were going to do it, and they had a scene of people who liked to have a good time and who all were very talented, and it wasn't a normal thing. It wasn't this retro thing. That wasn't what you wanted to do it back then. But what ended up growing out of that was, it's impossible to imagine the sort of blues revival that started in the 80s, largely with the Thunderbirds and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, sort of one of the first major movements of reviving a genre and making it really commercially successful again. It's impossible to imagine that happening and then that cycle of happening every once in a while, every 10, 20 years, without this environment. Whether it was, maybe if it didn't happen at Antones, it would have happened somewhere else, but without that sort of alchemy being all put together, it's, and then here we are many years later, proof that the formula works is the sort of stratospheric success of Gary Clark Jr. that started side stage at Antones. I mean, how many clubs can lay claim to sort of creating that international thing, not once but twice? I mean, it's pretty special, and it's something to not take lightly. And it comes down to these few people who are really driven and who really care about the really best shit, and then you either get on board or if you don't, we don't care. I mean, there's some people who are real stubborn and real hard-headed like that can kind of, change everything. It's pretty special.
I want to take a quick break because we got to give a shout out to our second sponsor, Slab Barbecue. Go to RealDopeBarbecue.com for their menu. 2 locations in Austin, 183 in Burnett next to Sherlock's, and at the Y in Oak Hill. Get yourself a Notorious PIG or Dunk, which is like a pound of meat. All the meats they have and all the sauces they have.
Wow.
No sides. They do delivery, pickup, and catering also. Treat yourself with some dope barbecue and mention the feedback at checkout for 10% off your meal. So you're talking about...
I've had it before. It's good.
It's really, really good.
Vouch. Cosign.
Yep. And this is a barbecue guy, so so he knows. She's talking about bringing back that vibe and staying true to what Antone started, and like you said earlier, Antone moved like what 6? This is the 6th edition of Antone. 6th location. From so is it 6th Brazos to Anderson?
Great Northern.
I was going to say, can you do it without looking at the paper?
Yeah, hold on. Guadalupe. I will. Hold on. So, 6th and Brazos, Anderson Lane, Guadalupe, then 5th and Lavaca, then Riverside, and now here.
Yep.
Well done.
Thank you. I mean, the first time I walked in was at the Lavaca one. That's the one that most people know. Called Generation.
Technically, the second one was on Great Northern Boulevard, but it was very near Anderson Lane.
Oh, sorry. Close enough.
Yeah, my first show as well was Antone's over on 5th.
It was there starting in '97, so for a lot of us, I think that's
right.
The
generation.
Unless you grew up here, there's a lot of people who that was there.
So bringing it back downtown, from Riverside, it was like a 2-year gap, trying to figure out what was going to happen. What made you decide to get involved with that?
Get involved in general?
Yeah, just bringing it back, taking on that project.
So I remember the day when it was announced, Kevin Curtin announced that at the Chronicle, announced that it was going to be for sale. And myself and a lot of our little peer group of people that, are in this world and hold Antones as this kind of pinnacle of the Austin club scene, everything. We were all kind of scrambling to call like our mentors and folks and wondering who's going to do it, like, because we thought one of the older guys would do it. We thought Steve Wertheimer from Continental and Seaboys, maybe he would take it on, or maybe Jimmy Vaughn or Jimmy's longtime manager Corey Moore, who also does Austin Speed Shop. Never in a million years that we think that we would. But we started calling around to some of these guys and that were sort of shocked when they said, we're too old to be messing with that, but you guys should do it, you know.
Oh, you got their blessing.
And we'll totally support you. And you know, I would be lying though if I didn't also say that there was also some caution, some words of caution, because you know, Antone's kind of out there on Riverside. It had kind of a hard run and kind of a slow decline, and so
didn't it turn more into an event space than
it just was more of a venue. That was the
venue.
largest,
Yeah, venue.
That was well, with the only exception being Great Northern, actually, because Great Northern was actually the largest room.
Oh, really?
In part, that was because they kind of knew that was going to be a temporary space.
Mm-hmm.
So they took on more square footage than they needed further away from downtown. They could kind of scale the size of it up and down with like pipe and drape and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the Riverside location was the second largest, and really, you know, it was such a short stint at Great Northern that it was really the largest that anyone had ever tried to like make the club capacity wise. Mm-hmm. They called it a 900 cap. You know, I don't. But anyway, because sorry, I want to get back to what I was saying.
So people,
about,
you're asking around.
So the words of caution were just basically like, it had kind of had this slow demise over there, and so you don't just go pick that up lightly. You know, one analogy I came up with one day, it was kind of like, you know, the kids start getting into grandpa's closet and kind of start messing with his things and tinkering, and it's like, y'all be careful with that stuff. You know, that's meaningful stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you mean the older generation was like cautioning
you know, just you don't go. You know, just you got it was all about
respect the history of it.
Yeah.
But what was kind of cool was, I think when they saw us like genuinely getting interested for the right reasons and wanting to kind of carry on those traditions and carry on that culture and all that, then that concern shifted to a lot of support and enthusiasm. It was kind of like they were saying, wow, these kids, there's actually some hope for these kids yet. You know, there's actually some hope for these kids yet.
They might be all right.
They get it. And so anyway, that was really important. I mean, we needed the support and blessings of several key cultural stakeholders, Susan also being one of those people, of course. But then it wasn't that easy. You know, then some of us got involved and tried to kind of like get our hat in the ring in terms of, hey, we're interested, da-da-da. Mm-hmm. Well, long story short, you know, it was it wasn't that easy. There was some competition, and you know, we ended up sort of stepping away from the negotiating table at one point, saying like, yeah, I don't know if we can do that. You know, I guess maybe this is the one that got away, or you hear the story like, if something's meant to be, you know, it'll come back, type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, sure enough, you know, the way it played out with another group ended up buying the name of the club and deciding that the Riverside location was not the best spot for it, which we all agreed with that. Mm-hmm. And then they had some trouble finding the new space, had some trouble finding who's going to be like the operating partner, and that group basically sort of got truncated down to just one guy, who's Spencer Wells, who's one of our partners now. Mm-hmm. And I got to know Spencer through his brother Arnold Wells, who's a music photog here in Austin. And anyway, we got to talking, and basically it did kind of circle back. You know, those guys actually did a lot of good in like they moved the ball down the field. You know, got the rights, got it negotiated, kind of got it kind of cleaned up, and then serendipitously ended up circling back with myself and some of my partners.
Did you know Zach already, or did you guys?
Oh yeah. Zach and I knew each other from mutual music friends, and
how did you guys
from
meet?
Arlen Studios.
Yeah, that was the obvious question.
Yeah.
Zach had done some projects at Arlen Studios, but then
my wife went to Austin High with all these people. I met a ton of these folks through her. You know, she was there. Gary went to Austin High, even I'd say Will and stuff. So a lot of these, like Will in particular, I met mostly through my wife, and then making some records at his studio.
So playing the guitar and getting the girl really opened up your career.
Circle back real quick.
So I was trying to give a more succinct kind of overview of this, and it totally failed. So
It's all right. I think we're over an hour by now, but that's all right.
But the bottom line is we felt a tremendous amount of responsibility to not let Antones die on our watch, you know, or on our kind of turn of being adults. I mean, it was very much a coming of age project, because 3 years ago or however long when we started this, again, we were kind of thinking we're not worthy, you know,
Well, I mean,
we don't know how to do this stuff, and this is too important. But the generation above us was kind of saying,
it's your turn.
hey, it's your turn.
Yeah.
And so we knew that was a tremendous amount of responsibility to take on as well. I mean, the burden of, oh my gosh, like what if we screw it up? Like then it's on our hands, you know?
Right.
So we put a lot of thought into what it needed to be in the, you know, when you take an old brand, especially one that has touched so many people and there's so much
History and weight
for
to
it
it
and all these things. It's you know, you have to make a whole lot of people happy. Basically, Antones had 5 previous iterations before this one, so there was a lot of different folks that said, "Oh no, Antones didn't like this. It's like this," or "No, it's not. It's not like that at all. It's like this." Well, they were all right, because they could have all gone to different venues, you know.
Right.
So we tried to learn and soak up as much of the history as possible. You know, some of it we already had. Zach already had, of course, you know, the history of the blues and everything. But I mean, even just like the nuts and bolts. I started really learning about the locations of these places and why they made those decisions, and how big the rooms were, how big the stages were, how big the bars were, how big the bathrooms were, all that stuff.
A lot of homework.
And we all agreed that it needed to come back downtown, because
That's where it started, just a few blocks away from it.
And it's just this was also at a time where, you know, even 3.5 years ago, you know, there was a lot of talk in Austin about abandoning downtown with music venues and the creative class, and you can't, doesn't work anymore, we got to go east, we got to go south.
Right.
Well, I'm all for the expansion of those scenes and music venues and all that, but it's kind of common sense, and it's also been proven by some of these studies that are done on the ebbs and flows of downtown creative sectors and downtown small businesses, that if you lose your creative clustering in a downtown sector, that's a really bad indicator. That's kind of the canary in the mine for your downtown.
It's a catalyst for everything else
not just that, but I mean the fact that he opened it, you know, in '75, he pretty much started Austin as a live music capital of the world.
Well, in a lot of ways, it certainly sort of helped consummate that with 6th Street, because when he brought Antones to 6th Street, there was no 6th Street. That was just like saying 3rd Street or anything.
Yeah.
It didn't mean anything musically or as a business district or anything like that. So, but anyway, needed to be downtown, needed to be a club again, which is a real term of endearment in Austin. You know, all venues, all clubs are venues, but not all venues are clubs, basically. You know, a venue is a place that maybe it's not open all the time, maybe it is, but maybe it's events, maybe it's, you know, shows, whatever. A club, in Austin at least, means there's consistency to it. You can go there consistently and see music. It means that there's thought and integrity behind the curation of what's being presented. So a lot of clubs are genre specific, or you sort of at least can know the types of stuff you might see there, because the person behind it, in this case Zach, you know, the people booking the bands are really trying to do something cool and not just trying to, you know, get cover bands or put anything up there just to like fill the place. You're really trying to present something, and then the third thing, of course, is being like an economic contributor to the local music economy, paying musicians, like really kind of having the musicians backs and saying, like, no, we're not going to do no cover, or we're not going to, yeah, we could make a little bit if we kind of just got musicians that didn't, made the musicians kind of fight to just who was going to play for the least amount of money or something. I mean, this happens in other markets.
Right.
But being a club in Austin, Texas means, no, we're going to take care of the musicians first. Because if the right musicians are in there, then the fans are going to follow,
Right.
That's literally building the club from the musician out, from the stage out, from the sound, from making them comfortable. Because if you can get really good musicians to like your club, everything else kind of falls in.
And that ties into the earlier conversation we were talking about. That's why Clifford built it in the first place and why it got so much renown.
Well, one aspect sorry, yeah.
Well, so I know I'm really belaboring this now, but so those three things needed to be downtown, needed to be a club again. So that basically meant a smaller room in this case. We also liked the idea of having an events component if possible, but that was kind of icing on the cake. So basically, we just started looking for spaces. We started checking out every big rectangle around downtown, as I call them. Basically, just looking for a big space. Ideally, you don't have to rip out a kitchen or rip out offices. You're looking for something that's still kind of a shell, because then the rents are going to be cheaper and all that. And that's not easy. There's not many of them left. So it took we were kind of doing that in parallel while some of the mechanics of actually even having the opportunity to take on Antones were still kind of playing out as well, kind of on the hunch that, like I said, it might circle back. And we got really lucky with this space, really, really lucky. I mean, I swear this place kind of just fell from the sky, because this block used to be so nondescript before the Westin Hotel was across the street.
Right.
Before the Westin Hotel was there, and if I would have asked you, hey, you know where Eddie Visa is downtown, right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, of course. What's just east of there? What's like a block or two east
Paradox?
of there?
The fire station? Paradox.
Well,
You're dating yourself now.
Yeah, it's just
Trinity Hall.
this building was kind of right under our nose, to be honest, because we were walking around.
I don't remember what was here before.
Well, it had been it was Maxi Glass downstairs, which who had been there since the early 80s, and it was Action Screen Graphics upstairs, who had been there since the early 90s.
Never noticed.
No.
So, got really lucky with the space. And then the last thing I'll say about this iteration of Antones, and one thing that's different about it than all the previous versions, is the first 5, there was never very much downtime at all. In fact, they would always time it to where, maybe they were closed 1-2 nights, maybe, but they would have a farewell show at this place and then, right away pick up at the other place. So there was a lot of continuity. They wanted to keep that continuity going, which is a good thing. The silver lining of losing that continuity and having 2 years of no Antones, which, by the way, the reason why we still, like, our 42nd anniversary is coming up, and we don't count the 2 years that it was closed, in part because guess who was carrying the torch for us during that interim was Antone's Record Shop. So big shout out to Yves Moncey and Mike Buck for having in-stores and basically keeping that culture alive during the time when Antones Nightclub was still finding its new home.
They're celebrating 30 years in August of the record shop. They opened in 87, so Eve and Mike are doing a bunch of promotions and things in August, and some of that will tie in here and stuff.
Right.
It's pretty amazing to just how the time
Yep, go check them out. So I'm almost finished. So here's the last thing. So
I have another question.
So because of that continuity, the one downside of that is I feel like they were probably always they were always so focused on just looking forward and onward that they weren't able to really be nostalgic or really pay as much homage, because they weren't wanting to pay homage to the past. They were wanting to keep it going, keeping the lights on, keep it open.
Right.
The next show, got to get the new spot open. It's kind of why, well, I won't go too far into this, but some of the old folks that you would think have all the posters say, man, you think I was collecting those things back then? I was too busy getting the new posters up.
Right.
And I totally get that as a venue owner. It's like when somebody rips the posters off the wall, you're like, oh, thanks. You saved me some work, because I'm just thinking about the next show, the next night, the next weekend. But anyway, so without having that downtime for us to really do the research, really look back, find the best little things of all the previous 5 locations that we could implement into this one, we wouldn't have it wouldn't have been able to, like I said, appease all those different generations, all those different perspectives of what Antones should be, could be, was, all of that. The way I kind of just sum that up is, you really can't have a rebirth without a death, you know. And prior to that, Antones really had never died. So it did, sadly, but the positive of that is it gave us the time to actually make this one a true rebirth.
Well, speaking of rebirth, I think, you know, one thing that Cliff was very adamant about was like passing on to the next generation. Like we talked about having young artists come play with legends, you know, bringing you guys on as the next generation. And now that you have the opportunity to, you know, bring the brand back and, you know, revive the venue, you're looking at modernizing a little bit and kind of adapting Antones to today's world, not to the 70s. So maybe musically, you know, bringing on some more diverse music to play, and not just blues. I mean, you guys got, I mean, there's hip hop, there's, you know, there's funk, and is that a conscious effort that you guys made to, you know, bringing this back, saying, okay, we have an opportunity to bring a large audience and bring in a younger audience into Antones so they learn about the history and the venue itself?
I think, for one, you know, there aren't enough blues acts to play here every night, really.
Right.
But another one is just, you've got to bring new blood in here. You've got to bring young people in here. You've got to keep the lights on. You've got to sell drinks, you know. And so there's a ton of artists that you can sort of, in different genres and things. I mean, in some ways, the bread and butter of this place on the weekends, on a good weekend, lately is like New Orleans bands, brass bands, funk bands from New Orleans and stuff, because it's still very true to the sound and true to the stuff that Clifford liked and stuff, but also it draws a very wide range of ages, of people who like to dance, of people like to party. I mean, that's what everyone loves about New Orleans. And then when we get the brass bands in here and we get folks like that in here, I'm really pleased, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's a business, and you've got to bring in new people. You've got to book artists that have their fans who will come and who will support the bar and who will tip the bartenders, and that's it. And so I think when we first came back, obviously we leaned very heavily on the blues, and the Antones sound still hasn't changed in terms of our weekly programming in and out.
Right.
But, you know, on the weekends, we do different stuff. There are different promoters who put shows in here. You know, I was thinking about this last night because I went and saw Wonder Woman at the Draft House. And, you know, the Draft House is seen as a cool place for movies. You know, they bring the blockbusters, and when they get a chance of doing any genre, any big movie, anything like that, you can see it at the Draft House. But you know, the people behind the scenes really care about movies because of, you know, the stuff that plays pre-show, which is kind of like our music that you hear when you come in, or
that was showing up 30 minutes early.
Yeah, or, you know, when they do Fantastic Fest, or you know. And so what I do is I think about who's going to pack the club, who's a different group of fans, because you truly can't, you know, people aren't going to come to any venue to see a band more than a couple times a month. And if you go to the same well over and over again twice a week, then eventually everyone's, you know, they love Antones, but hey, I don't want to go there 6 times a month. I'm just, even if I love all these acts, I'm not going to go. So what I try to do, and sort of as the booking philosophy has evolved over the years, is kind of, you know, think about that. Think about who's going to pack the joint on the weekends. If a road show needs to come in and maybe knock out one of our weeklies during the week, well, you know, hey, all of those guys are cool. Like, hey, you know, you'll be back next week, but we have a chance to do something cool in here. There's a big show coming through. And then a few times a month, 2 or 3 times a month, way more than that in July because we're celebrating our anniversary. But, you know, do something that I, as the big music nerd, get really excited about. And I know that people who are really into Antones or into music, or who and that's stuff that the Draft House does too.
Right. Great parallel
they
there.
do some really deep stuff for the Tarantino Fest, or I know that doesn't happen anymore, but show that behind it you really care, and and like, hey, yeah, we did something a little different, but oh my God, can you believe that they're doing 4 nights with a Lazy Lester or something like that? That's you've got to keep your head in that space, but you also have to keep finding new people to come here.
To me, what makes a club interesting, or a particular theater house interesting, is when they kind of have that vantage point. Like, they have credibility in something, some vantage point. And you can venture out beyond that, but you've got to maintain that kind of credibility from that vantage point, because that's what gives you like the perspective. Antones, the classic genres of Antones are blues, soul, R&B, funk, zydeco, brass band. Well, that's a lot right there. And then if you think about all these genres that are inspired by that, that touches almost everything. So I don't really see it as a departure so much as just a translation into, we're connecting back with the roots and the origin of these genres, but we're also kind of embracing the future, open arms and the demographic and age group and everything that comes with that.
Well, can you speak to the tradition of Blue Monday and what it meant for Cliff and what it means to the venue
today? Yeah.
Well, Blue Monday, I don't know how early they started it. I think probably in '75, but it's been held down by different kind of luminaries over the years, but the longest by far was Derek O'Brien, who's sort of his calling card as being the house guitar player of Antones. And Blue Monday back in the 70s and in the 80s, you look at those calendars, they would be acts who went on to greater success or greater renown and things like that. But Blue Monday is a Fats Domino song, and I don't know, I guess Larry Monroe had the Blue Monday show and things like that, but in terms of Antones, it meant just every week a great blues band, and it was the most well-known of all the residencies in terms of not being about the artist so much as just the night and the club. And so I remember meeting someone, there was a time on Lavaca where it was Blue Tuesday, because they had some big country residency or something that was happening on Mondays, and there was like a year and a half where Derek and the guys played on Tuesdays. And I remember meeting some guy who was like, oh man, I love Antones, Blue Tuesday. And I'm like, man, you lived in Austin in 2000.
You know the range.
This time, but if you know anything about this stuff, you know that, but I digress. But, it's important to us. We get people from the sort of different farm teams of Antones, musicians to always play. Derek is here most Mondays, holding it down, putting a band together with some old timers. I say that in the term of like baseball, baseball players, old, like it's a good thing, not like,
term of endearment.
Like the guys who really know their way around
right.
it, and then maybe some young guys like Eve will do them, or Johnny Bradley or Keller Brothers and stuff. And so it's a good, if you want to come here for the first time, it's a good way to see a little bit of now, a little bit of the old days, and kind of different musicians joining on stage and kind of playing off each other.
Oh, dope. We're going to wrap things up.
That's fine. Well, when you book, I love hearing about how people book and the philosophy around that. So during the week, is that mostly residencies, while the weekend you're always trying to book something from out of town or something different and new? Like, what's the philosophy around that?
Yeah, that's right. I look at the weekends first. We need firepower on Fridays and Saturdays for sure. We need we can't really have duds on those. So those kind of fill up the farthest out, almost always with road shows or with people who play here occasionally, but we know can pack the place. And everybody has, through the rest of the week, we have an early and a late show, Sunday through Thursday, happy hour, and a night show that, or one doors at 5. We have happy hour from 5 to 7 here. The music starts at 6:30 and runs till about 9. 6:30 till about 9, and then late show from 10 to 1. and those people kind of have those penciled in indefinitely. If something comes along that we just can't say no to, there's a big road show coming through that we've got to do. Like I said, they'll skip a week.
Yeah.
And, we try to be all these things at once. I mean, in a perfect world, we could just have our residencies and just have Friday and Saturday. And for the first 6 months or so, that's what we did. But,
that's not how people tour.
People land at Houston and Dallas on Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
They really want to play here on a Sunday. I wouldn't have my job for very long if I started turning down those things, because ultimately a really good month is, I look at, okay, we represented a lot of our locals. Everyone was happy they got to play here 3 or 4 times. We had some crazy pops during the week because this happened and this happened, and then my weekend shows delivered as well. And it's all a big mix of all that.
Yeah.
You always want to be, I think, the balance in, again, club booking, not necessarily just venue booking, where another thing about venue booking, and not everybody would agree with this, but venue booking, if you don't have a good show, you just don't open that night. That's a lot of venues are not open every single night.
Right.
As a club, you don't have the luxury of doing that, because you're making a statement saying, no, we're going to have music every single night. So if you go too heavy on just all the residencies, all the local stuff, all the blues and roots genres and whatever, well, eventually that might get monotonous, or you might, that might kind of get stale or whatever.
Right.
If you just do the road shows, then, on a night when you don't have one, nobody's showing up because there's no baseline.
Yeah.
So I always think of it as, you want to create this robust kind of foundation, so that if the road shows just go away, or something, you've still got you've got this platform that you've built. So that really is more important. I mean, first, and it's also harder to do, but you build that base of people that are loyal to your brand, loyal to the experience, both musicians and customers alike, and then I just think of it as sprinkling. You just sprinkle the little accents on and find where you can kind of put a little here and a little bit. You're not so much where the cake implodes.
Picture Zach in the lab just.
Yeah, not so much.
I see that meme.
Yeah, that meme with the salt.
I was going to say, just look at our calendar in August for when all the road shows go away, because nobody tours in August. So if you want to see what it looks like week in, week out, that's the baseline. We'll have a hell of a lot of residencies in August because people aren't really touring, but March, April, May, September, October.
If they are touring, they're going places where it's not 104 degrees.
Yeah, right.
Pretty much.
Don't blame 'em. Can't blame 'em.
I have one more question before we close out.
Okay, go ahead.
And we do a lot of coverage, and we have some employees here from like South by and other events like that. I haven't seen Antones as a venue space except for really doing South by. Is there any other times? And maybe speak to a little bit of the craziness of South by and just what y'all do around that.
So
He doesn't sleep.
Are we using my definition of venue, or what do you mean by you don't normally see it as a venue?
Well, I mean, when you're not booking the shows, someone else is renting out the venue and bringing it in.
South by is one of the only times, that we collaborate with partners. Like, we basically partner with other brands, and that's pretty common for both clubs and venues in Austin during that time. South by is its own paradigm. It's like
It's his own
you want to be
dimension.
you want to. I mean, I've said for a while, it is just 2 weeks of the year, and so I would never want to build a business model too much around just 2 weeks of the year. Antones is certainly focused on that other 50 weeks of the year in terms of what we're doing with the Antones Legacy and what we're providing to the Austin music economy and all that. But if you can have your cake and eat it too, you do that 50 weeks of the year, and then for the other 2 weeks you say, okay, if we're going to do South by, we might as well do it all the way.
Right.
And we certainly took that into account building out this space. We wanted it to be something that would be very accommodating and attractive to those types of partners, and so far that's that's worked for us. They usually have bigger budgets than we do too, so
Right.
they get
Yeah,
acts. I mean, we don't complain. Like, they get some awesome acts in here that we otherwise wouldn't get to have in the door. So far it's been a total win-win
Good.
for us.
Good.
Great.
Any other partnerships in Austin? I mean, y'all don't partner with ACL or anybody like that as well, do you?
Well, I mean, different promoters put on shows here. C3 puts shows
Oh,
in.
okay, so
Yeah,
they do.
C3 does,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mohawk
Yeah.
put shows in.
Okay,
Martin
Graham.
Walker's
Yeah,
got
Martin
some
Walker,
stuff
yep.
on the way.
Good. Good to know.
Moon Tower Comedy Festival, we were a venue for 2 nights this year. So we
Hell
want to, in an effort to bring in diverse programming, or just, what's important is artists that have a fan base that will follow them. You can't expect Antones to be full by people who just want to go to Antones all the time. And certainly making ourselves accessible to these other promoters has brought a hell of a lot of people in here that we would not have brought in otherwise, and we're really grateful for that. And I think we work really hard to stay competitive and to stay accessible and to keep that flowing, because
Right.
that brings a ton of people, and then maybe when they walk in, they see the pictures on the wall and they go home and think about it, maybe when come back some other time just to see what we're up to on our own. But we're a equal, open playing field for all kind of promoters.
I had my party here.
That's true.
We, and that's, another thing that we felt like, Antones needed to do in the new kind of landscape is really be a community space of sorts.
Yeah.
Because the old versions of Antones were always that. So we work with a lot of nonprofits. We work with a lot of individual folks doing art exhibits and things.
Like
Yeah.
Shaka's.
Shaka's way.
Yeah, and of course, like back saying with feedback we're happy to have here,
Yeah.
we knew like we wanted to be able to say yes to as many things as possible, which is why this upstairs is so great, because we don't have to displace the consistency of the downstairs
Right,
music
right.
to do all that stuff. But I do want to use this as an opportunity to give a little shout out about the 42nd anniversary that's coming up in
Please do.
July.
The next thing, yeah.
Please do.
Because we're working with some really cool partners on that. Planet K is our presenting sponsorship, so we're really excited and going to be doing some cool things with them. Also, we're two of our supporting partners for the anniversary are Ticketfly, who's our ticketing platform, and also the Westin Hotel across the street, who's been totally awesome to us. Just nothing better than being right across the street from a busy hotel. So,
That's true.
so
Anything
yeah.
I want to plug for the 42nd that's coming
Yeah,
out?
the Gary show is sold out already, but there's other bands you want to plug.
Yeah, opening night will be Friday, June the 30th. And speaking of all the young and the old school, or all that stuff that we talk about, it's the Peterson Brothers with C.J. Chenier. So
Love the Pearson
the
Brothers,
son
man.
of the guy who opened the first place, who also opened our place, and an amazing artist in his own right, C.J. Chenier, will headline, or he plays second. But the Peterson Brothers, of course, who have played Antones a lot over their, short times on this earth, will kick it off. And then the next night we're doing upstairs, we'll have Margaret Moser's Robert Johnson exhibit that they're bringing up from Tex Pop in San Antonio.
Yeah.
And I've got an artist from Bentonia, Mississippi, Jimmy Duck Holmes, is going to play the event up here, and then open for Ian Moore downstairs. The next weekend we've got Lazy Lester with a bunch of great Louisiana artists. I'm going to be playing guitar with a swamp pop singer named TK Hewlin, putting the band together for that. So still booking, still playing all at the same time. And the next night we've got a tribute to James Cotton and Muddy Waters. Cotton lived here for a long time, was one of the greatest harmonica players ever, if not the greatest, and played in Muddy Waters band. And a lot of the old gang who used to play Antones and friends of Cotton's and people who were in Muddy's band will be on that show, which should be real special. Rick McNulty is doing his Saturday night show live from Big Henry's that night, and we'll be interviewing these musicians while he plays records that they played on and stuff. So that'll be real cool. And then it just goes on and on for there. We have Jimmy Vaughn playing on the official anniversary date. We have Bob Schneider playing here for the first time with his full band. And of course, many people's introduction to Antones on Lavaca was seeing Bob and the Scabs and various incarnations. And we just have a lot of cool stuff. I mean, it's the time where
CJ
every
Chenier-
night.
CJ Chenier's coming back.
Yep. Every night it's
something.
Antones up and down.
It's pretty much like all of July, like 2/3 through July, right?
That's right. Yeah. It's technically June 30th through July 22nd. I mean, some of our regular programming will happen throughout there, but between July the 6th and the 15th, there's something big here every single night.
Awesome,
and a lot of
man.
really good opportunities. to
Congratulations.
see Antones.
Yes, congratulations to what y'all have done here and carry
Seriously.
the legacy.
Can you talk about the foundation before we leave?
Yes, the Clifford Antone Foundation. I a few years ago got involved with Clifford Help Kids, which is an annual gala that benefits American Youth Works. Clifford started that 16 years ago now, and one of the things that we realized is, 16 years ago, that organization was much smaller on its trajectory, and while we want to continue that tradition, we also wanted to create a vehicle that could go plant other seeds, so that 16 years from now there's more versions of that. So the Clifford Antone Foundation is two things. It is one part mini venture philanthropy fund. We're a membership-based organization, so everybody gives either quarterly or annual membership dues, and then we take that money and basically make strategic donations to existing music charities that are already pursuing our mission objectives, which are investing in the future and honoring the past. We feel like that was Clifford's approach to it. So we work with several organizations that are working with the youth, and usually with music being a part of the curriculum and part of the framework for the good that they're doing. And then we also work with charities that work with elder musicians and helping make sure they're taken care of and have access to medicine and care, or getting an instrument repaired or whatever they need. And then the second piece of it, of the Clifford Antone Foundation, is we say we're a cultural preservation society, and that's the fun part. We do a couple shows a year for our members, one in the fall, one in the spring, where we bring a legacy act, somebody that has historic ties to Clifford and Antones and Austin, or some combination of those, and we get our member base in there to enjoy that and be a part of that, which stretches a pretty wide span age-wise. So again, that was something that Clifford did by getting the young folks and the old folks together and using music as this conduit to kind of create this feedback loop between the two generations. That's in doing that, he was literally passing on and preserving the culture. So so far so good with that. We're up to just about 200 members, a little over 200 members, and we've only haven't even been, I guess it's been just over a year, because we actually launched on June 9th of 2016. So that's been really exciting.
Congratulations.
And
You guys are killing
look forward to doing more things. In fact, we will very soon be announcing, and I think we can go ahead and maybe announce
Exclusive.
that in October we're going to be having Booker T here at the club. Thanks to Zach for lining that up.
Seriously?
Booker T. Jones playing Green Onions on the Antones House organ.
So
You heard it here first, folks.
There's a few things cooler than that.
So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about the Clifford Antone Foundation and how you could become a member, you can go to cliffordantonefoundation.org and learn more. And you can sign up, become a member right there on the website, and come to the show in October.
Sweet. What's your social medias?
Clifford Antone Foundation.
And for Antones, it's just Antones. AntonesNightclub.com is the main website. Check out the lineup. You can get your tickets right now. 42nd anniversary in July, starting on the 30th, right? You said?
Yep,
That's
next
right.
Friday.
Congratulations, guys. Seriously, killing
Thanks.
it. I love these shows because we don't have to ask much and to get to talk. I love
Just story
it.
after story.
I
Yeah, that
think-
was easy on our side.
I wasn't able to time it, but I think it's been 2 hours easily. I don't know. It'll be a long show. We won't cut it because there's so many gems in here that that are worth it. I really appreciate you guys. One last thing I want to note: today is kind of a sad day. I'm a big hip hop fan, as you guys know, and we just lost Prodigy from Mobb Deep. 42 years old. He had sickle cell since birth, and Mobb Deep really had it really hits home because one that was the first CD I ever bought as a teenager in France, and they taught me English. When I say that I learned English listening to hip hop, like Mobb Deep was like my dictionary, my everything. So just learn all these words by heart. So when I found out that P died today, really hit me up. So rest in peace.
I actually didn't know that. Yeah.
Rest
and
in
very
peace,
influential to a lot of the French hip hop stuff like Passy.
Oh yeah. In France, we love Mobb Deep. Yeah, from Passy to Ministère Amer, I Am. I mean, all the DJs in France and the artists will tell you that Mobb Deep was like up there, as far as production and lyrics, and just loved it. So sad
Why
day.
it's all the more important to see the artist.
Yes,
when
I
you
glad I
can.
got to see him at South by, and we got to interview them actually for feedback.
Hey,
a few years ago.
I'm processing that because I was a big fan as well. But we have been doing some cool hip hop shows. We've got Raekwon coming.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Into
the
September.
Wild
Into
September
September.
album dropped a few weeks ago, or
very good.
a few months ago, and I'm looking forward to that. I would be front and center.
We had Cool Keith down a few months ago.
Yep.
We had
Yeah.
Far Side. So to me, that type of hip hop to me is just an extension of the roots music that.
Love it. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much. Shout out to Slab. Shout out to Herd Presents. Make sure you get your tickets. Check out their lineup. Go get yourself some barbecue. Any last words before we wrap up this long show? Thank you
y'all.
so much, fellas. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you
Support
for tuning
music.
in. Support music. Tip your bartender. Tip the band.
Open
Come to Antones.
Open 7 days a week. The record store is open at noon every day. You can get beers down there. You can peruse through one of the most tightly curated selections of R&B, soul, funk, blues, Zydeco vinyl, curated by Noel Wagner out of New Orleans. And then here at the club doing 2 shows a night, 7 days a week. We're open till 2 a.m., 7 days a week. We do not stop.
Nope.
Keeping the blues alive.
No
Come see
days
us.
off.
Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. Follow the feedback everywhere on social media, and we'll talk to you next time.
Goodbye, world.
Ciao, ciao.